Well, let's bring in our panel of press gallery journalists now. Susan Delacourt is a columnist and bureau chief for the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for La Presse. And John Ivision is a columnist for the National Post and bureau chief for Post Media. Good to see you all. Let's talk about, I guess, the bigger story of the day. That's Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott and their decision to seek re-election as independents. Cast aside the party system. They don't want to take orders from the centre. They don't want to deal with any of that stuff. Susan, what do you think? Is this a smart move on their part, or a potential career ender?
So I was one of the many people thinking they were joining the Greens. I take it Elizabeth May was also thinking that up until Friday.
To the point that she was prepared to give up her job for
That
Jody
is the
Wilson-Raybould.
weirdest story of the day, yeah. So I think it's different circumstances for each one. I think Jody Wilson-Raybould has her own brand and her own recognition out there, and could, I think, possibly win as an independent. Again, I don't know Vancouver Granville intimately, but I think Ontario's going to, and the ridings around the GTA are going to be really tough, and I don't know that Jane Philpott's chances as an independent are all that great. We'll see. Here in the Ottawa bubble, I think there's a sense that their 15 minutes has been up for a while. But it is possible that outside they have certain name recognition and brand recognition, and they'll attract some people to their cause.
What do you think of this decision, Joel-Denis?
Well, a bit surprising, because in the last 40 years, I think 5 MPs have been elected as independent, so it's a tough battle that they have ahead of them. But I mean, still, it means they have put their own interests, I think, aside, facing this kind of battle that they will be facing. But I think when I watched the press conference by Jane Philpott today, I was a bit impressed by the way she sort of gave people a crash course on independent MP 101. I will be alone. I will be fighting for your cause. And it's not going to be
made a pitch for donations. And
exactly,
by the way, if you give them to me now
job.
before the writ drop, I can't give you a tax receipt.
And she was funny. She was to the point, and she had some conviction. So I think she might cause some surprise, but enough to the point of winning that riding. I'm also to the point, to the view, as Susan just shared, that it will be a tough battle for her. But as for Jody Wilson-Raybould, I think she has a good shot at winning it because of her standing and also name recognition. And also, I think a lot of allies will pour a lot of effort to help her win that riding. But at the end of the day, this hurt the Liberals, I think, most among the political parties.
Yeah, how come?
Because they will grab away votes from the Liberal Party and provoke some maybe four-way race in Stouffville, Marketville that could open the door to the Tories. And in Vancouver Granville, the riding of Madame Wilson-Raybould, I think she has a good shot of putting aside the Liberal Party.
You know, and I think they'll garner a lot of interest when it comes to organizations like ours here at CPAC, who will want to look at ridings that might make a difference or that might be interesting in the race, because those two prominent politicians running as independents, I think, will likely be a story to see how they do, but also it keeps the snc-lavalin story alive again, at least in those two ridings during the campaign.
Yeah,
what do you think of the move?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that much that they didn't run for the Greens. I mean, the Greens only got, I think, 3% in Vancouver Granville last time, so, you know, it's a long way from there to winning. You know, I talked to Bill Casey today, who did this in 2008, won as an independent.
And actually increased his share of the vote, as I recall.
But very hard to do, because, as he pointed out, you can't raise money and issue a tax receipt until the writ drops. And even then, you've got to wait until you get the recognition of the Elections Canada certification before you can actually take those donations. So tough to get elected. And then when you're there, it's a kind of lonely existence. I mean, they talked about being this community of independence.
Well, and they seem to sound like that's part of their
plan.
Riding, part of their plan is they want to look across a new House of Commons after the election and see 30 independents.
Yeah, they've got a community of 2 right now, and maybe 3. You know, I mean, most independents are there by default because they've been misbehaved and been booted out of their parties. So, you know, I think it sounds great. People are disaffected with politics. They feel disconnected. They feel that there's too much partisanship. So I think there is a market for that. But the problem is, the party system is the basis for our responsible government system. You know, parties, when you do away with parties, as they seem to be doing in the UK right now, you know, we just saw the European elections, the parties that garnered 82% of the last election got 22%. the Conservatives and the Labour Party. When you do away with that, it creates opportunities for demagogues and agitators and basically chaos. And the problem with anarchy and chaos is that nobody obeys the rules.
I mean, I find myself watching again today, watching these news conferences, saying what I've been saying almost since the beginning of the story is, what's the end game? What do these two people want? And is that any clearer to us now? Did we hear what we want? A transformation of the whole Canadian political system today. We're tired of being bullied from the middle, not the middle, but from the center, the PMO, and non-elected officials. And is that a message you can ride to victory on?
Yeah, I keep hearing a lot about what they don't want. You know, we don't want this, we don't want that. We see Jody Wilson-Raybould still is out there saying, I have a story to tell. But tell it.
She did point out she wants to transform the political culture and make it more like Indigenous politics, where people strive towards a consensus. And that sounds all well and good, but it's, if you've got 338 independents trying to strive towards a consensus, not much is getting done.
I don't remember her arguing for consensus on SNC. I think it was her way or no way at all, frankly.
Well, on the Indigenous rights package, which was not her file, it was Carolyn Bennett's, she was in flirting with breaching cabinet solidarity, the way that she was telling people openly, we're not going that way, we're going to go this way. But that's hard to make a consensus when you're like that.
Let's remember that both Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould were first elected in 2015. They didn't have a long story, a long, rich story with the Liberal Party that they ran under the banner of, So I think they got to know how a political party operates throughout, sitting in Ottawa. So they discovered that this maybe not be the best vehicle that they like to advance their cause. And I think they're a bit idealist, if I may say, idealistic about politics. And I think that's what they want to reach by running as independent. Transform politics in a better way than submitting to party rules. And that's maybe a new phenomenon.
I was actually going back and reading some of Elizabeth May's statements recently, in the context of the fact that she was negotiating, as we now know, with these two, and the number of times she says the Green Party is not leader-driven. And it is true. She doesn't have a lot of MPs to boss around, but she has a party that she could throw her weight around, and she doesn't. And if they were looking for that kind of politics, I too am still struck by the fact that Elizabeth May asked them whether they wanted her job. But if they were looking for a different kind of politics, Elizabeth May has been doing it.
Right.
That's.
Well, I suppose if you're cynical about motives, somebody might say, look, say nice, all the conversation around joining the Greens, and you decide not to join the Greens, so you don't want to be part of the party, but you want the voters.
Yeah.
Say a nice thing about it, because they're going to need those voters in those two ridings, however numbers the Greens amount to, John, 3% in Vancouver Granville, but you need that 3% if you're Jody Wilson-Raybould.
The other thing that is striking is that Jody Wilson-Raybould had a conversation with Jagmeet Singh, and she didn't give it serious consideration the way she did with the Greens. Right. And they're the next obvious port of call. Maybe. So it just tells you the vigor.
Let me, if I can, we're running out of time. Let's switch gears here and talk about Chrystia Freeland tabling a Ways and Means notice of motion today to push ahead the ratification of the new trade deal with the United States and Mexico. Joel-Denis, when are we going to see this? I mean, there's no sort of timetable for this, and lots of uncertainty about when the Americans can get it ratified if they can, and when Canada would ratify it too.
Well, Madame Freeland made it clear that she wants to do it in tandem with the United States. So I think Canada wants to keep some kind of leverage with the United States. If you don't ratify it, we will not process it either. So they're watching over the 49th parallel what's happening in Washington, whether this deal will be adopted, because there's some opposition in Congress, namely from Democrats. They want some changes, and Donald Trump has said no to those changes, but still the Democrats dominate the House of Representatives and could cause some delay in implementing that deal. So Ottawa does not want to be the first to adopt it. They want to do it with the others so that there's some pressure.
John, ratification seems to be a fait accompli. What's not is when it'll happen.
Right. Yeah. Somebody called me to say that the government plans to call the House back in July because there's just no time between now and the end of the planned end of the session.
To get it all through. So recalling Parliament, House and Senate. Get this thing passed, because the Tories support it, the Democrats don't. Greens have concerns about it as well, but there's certainly the numbers, Susan, to put it through.
Yeah, definitely. But the other deadline looming is Mike Pence is here. The Vice President is here on Thursday, and he has said in his news release that he's here to ask for quick passage. So I read what happened, what Chrystia Freeland did today, as a compromise. Is, look, it's there, it's in the House.
We're ready. We're
ready.
standing by.
Yes. So she's thrown a little bone at the United States, but as JD says, she's holding out. Well, it's going to take a while. We may need to recall the House, just so that the United States knows they don't snap their fingers and we jump.
Right. Let's finish on this. Doug Ford, impromptu news conference today to announce that he's rolling back planned budget cuts that were going to affect municipalities for some public health care, paramedics, child care, because they pushed back hard because they'd already set their budgets, and then these were retroactive cuts. Surprised by this?
Yeah. Well, you're surprised when so much political capital was used putting this out, and the amount of protest it generated. I had heard last week that it was hurting Scheer, that people were starting to associate the Scheer's balanced budget talk, and we're going to get tough with on the budget.
Which he's since backed off a bit.
Exactly.
5 years now, not 2.
So we've got two backing offs here. We've got Scheer saying it may take a bit more time, and we've got Ford backing off, which shows this must have been hurting them really badly out there.
JD?
Well, yeah. I think there's a lesson there that cuts hurt people and they vote with their wallet too. And it could hurt the electoral fortunes of the Tories. We've seen the government of Doug Ford falling in the polls lately, and falling according to some polls, quite badly. So I think he understands, and that opens the way to more about face from this government. If this happened, other people took notice and may also organize in a way to force the government to backtrack on some of the costs. So it may not be it might be just the beginning of the dam opening, if I may say.
John, final thoughts.
The kind of grim irony in the fact that the worse the federal books get, the worse it is for Andrew Scheer. It's actually good for the government in some perverse way, because Scheer's the one who said he's going to balance the books in short order, and therefore the only way you can do that really is to make massive cuts or increase taxes, which he's not going to do. So yeah, I think it just proves that cutting services actually does not go down well with voters.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.